Good evening. Welcome to the Mom to Mom show, brought to you by ECRC and Martoma Productions, live on the Chaldean Moms of Metro Detroit page. My name is Lisa Denha, and joining me today are Dora Hermes-Sokolowski, Leanne Kerma, and Jolene Jiddu. They're here to discuss caring for elderly parents. So I thank you for joining us, and I encourage you to ask questions because our panel is here to answer any questions you may have to the best of their ability. Ladies, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. I'd like to talk a little bit about your journey with caring for elderly parents. And Dora, why don't we start with you? Why don't you give us a little bit of your background? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, my name is Dora, and I married Andre Sokolowski, and we ended up having two beautiful girls. When I first met Andre, his dad was just recently widowed. His mom had just passed away suddenly about 4 months before I met him. He was my orientation leader in law school. And so we were very busy at that time studying, of course. But one thing that he was busy with, in addition to being in law school, was taking care of his dad, who really had a hard time dealing with the loss of his wife of 40 years, and almost 40 years. And he had always been in our lives, and at some point, several years back, probably starting in 2015, his dad is a doctor, was living by himself, and fast forward from law school all the way to 2015, we have a busy law practice, our two kids, and then his dad is living not too far from us, but separately and completely independent, and he was still practicing medicine. But he started slipping, and we attributed some of those, forgetful type things to just old age. Eventually, we were on vacation one time. When we found him with a broken back. He kept telling us on the phone that he has a sprained muscle and that's all. But when we actually saw him after our vacation, he couldn't even move, and my husband took him immediately to the doctor. So that was the beginning of a whole series of events that we'll get into. But he was still living on his own. We took him in to our house just until he could heal. And at that time, we lived in West Bloomfield in a quad. So, of course, and it was a 3-bedroom. So you have to constantly go up and down stairs in a quad-style house. With the 3 bedrooms, we moved our 2 kids in together, and he had his own room. And because he couldn't step over the bathtub, it was very difficult. So he would be coming to our bathroom to shower with the step-in shower. He would be using the girls' bathroom to, in the morning. And of course, they're school age, and, he's an older man. He would spend forever in the bathroom. So they would say, "Mom, we got to brush our teeth." It got, I guess I'm skipping around right now, but the bottom line is, after much back and forth, his back healed, he went back home, but there was still some degradation of his abilities. He just wasn't able to just keep up with his bills, and he was forgetting things. Sometimes we'd go out of town for a few days, and we had a dog, and our normal routine was when we leave, he would come take care of our dog. He would probably come a couple times a day, get the mail, take care of our dog. One time we went out of town. This is after he healed, his back healed and everything. This is, maybe a year later. We came back, and when you open the garage, when you come home, the door to the house inside the garage is always unlocked, right? Well, he locked that door. And so we came back from out of town. We're like, oh my God, we took the longest road trip. We're so mad. We're like, "Dad, why did you lock the door?" So we go, and he didn't realize that he did that. We've never had dementia. I've never experienced dementia. He had never experienced dementia, Andre, with anyone in his family. So we didn't know the signs. Now looking back, I can see that those were the small clues that something was going on with his memory. But we didn't know. Like I said, we just attributed that to old age.
Did he eventually move in with you?
He did eventually move in.
Yes.
And that's where it got really out of control. He was deaf in one ear from many years ago, but he was just still functional and able to practice medicine. And because he was deaf in one ear, he would stay home all day, right? He couldn't practice medicine any longer at that point. We sold his house. He had lost his house, actually, because he kept forgetting to pay the mortgage. And because Andre and I practice law, and we also have a real estate company, we helped him navigate through that foreclosure. You know, that's a whole other story in and of itself. But we were able to get him out and move him in with us and sell the house without too much fallout from that. But regardless, when he moved in, it was overwhelming. My kids were at the point where now they're, you know, growing up. They need more attention. They're getting to be teenagers. They got friends. They want to come over, and he's sitting down all day long, blaring the TV. He had balancing issues, and I think that has something to do with the deafness. And so to go up and down and up and down, and there's not one bathroom that's really his. We just couldn't take it anymore. We also have a home office. We always worked, we always had a home office in addition to our law offices, so that we could take care of our kids. Nobody ever took care of our kids. That was how we planned it, by design. When we were in law school, we were never going to work for anybody, and no one was ever going to take care of our kids. We were going to do it.
Yeah.
We looked for probably a year for a house in the Bloomfield area where we lived, and there was no place without us taking a basement bedroom or being in a bedroom with no master bath. We couldn't find 2 master bedrooms with a first floor master suite where we could shut the door, he could blare the TV all day long, and we can all kind of sort of live a normal life. We found a perfect home in Holly, and that's where we've lived ever since. But soon after we moved there to Holly, things turned badly very quickly. He ended up incontinent. First of all, the forgetfulness increased. We started thinking this is much more than old age. And the incontinence got to a point where I'm literally, after working, 10, 12 hours sometimes a day, coming home from court all day long, I'd come home and I'm literally on, you know how we Chaldeans wash the floor, okay? I'm washing the floor on my hands and knees. I'm washing the walls because he wasn't being sanitary. He wasn't washing his hands, and he's holding onto the wall. And he had carpet in his master suite, and the carpet, we're steam cleaning the carpet non-stop. I mean, and then, I really lost my mind. We were all losing our mind, really, because we couldn't watch him anymore. And it got to the point where we were afraid that he might take the keys and leave, or he might just open the door and leave.
Was it dementia?
It ended up being dementia. We took him to a doctor, and the doctor said this is very clearly dementia. So then we struggled with, what do we do? How do we move somebody into our house when we have all these client files? We always took care of everything ourselves because we didn't want to trust our kids with other people. Now we're considering bringing a stranger into the house, and he really needed somebody 24 hours, especially when we'd go out of town for tennis tournaments. Our daughter plays tennis avidly, and she was, advancing, and we couldn't leave him with anyone.
You had to look into a facility.
So we did. And after many months of really fighting that, and I'll talk about some of the resources that I use to educate myself on options and come to peace with him being put in a facility. That was the best thing, and we did that. And
it actually worked out.
It really did. And, now he thinks he's the doctor of the whole facility. He spent many years being the doctor, the main guy at all the places he worked. He had his own practice. So now they call him Doc, which is what I always called him, and he thinks they answer to him.
And he's comfortable.
Very much so. It really was the best decision for him.
That's good. Now, you ended up having to go to take your father-in-law to a facility, but Leanne, your situation was a little different.
A little bit different.
Tell us about yours.
Still challenging, but a little bit different. My parents, I'm the oldest of 4 kids, so the 3 are married. I'm not. So, of course, a lot of it falls on the single person at home and so forth. My parents were very independent. Even though I lived with them at the home, it was a lot to watch over them, make sure they didn't need anything. It was more for our security and our self peace and mind. But they did everything. My dad sold his business. He's got a part-time job. I mean, he couldn't sit at home. He gardened. He plowed the snow. I mean, you name it, he did it.
Right.
And my mom was pretty active too. Not until, I'd say probably when he started having dialysis, probably around 2010, 2011, he was a champ. He'd be the first one there. His appointments were 6 o'clock in the morning. He'd drive himself there, drive himself back. He'd come home, take a nap half hour, and he was good to go. He did the grocery shopping, everything. They were both very self-sufficient. Still cleaning the house, doing everything, grocery shopping, going to the doctors by themselves. But then, at that time, I also had moved to Chicago. So out of the last 8 out of 10 years, I lived in Chicago for work. And my job took me there.
But your parents were still fine?
My parents were fine when I left. And plus, I had 3 siblings and a wonderful brother-in-law, 2 amazing sister-in-laws. They were at the house all the time. They were always there. They were always checking on them, anything that they needed. They were not even a phone call. It was like, what do you need? Okay, we're coming. So it was okay for me to go. But then when I had come home, that Memorial Day weekend of 2016, my dad was working in the garden, and we noticed as the day went on, something was not right. He kept insisting he was okay. The next day, we're like, something's not right. We took him into the ER. They said he had a stroke. So they kept him overnight then, but he was talking, moving, climbing stairs. He was fine. So they sent him home. When they sent him home, by the next morning, he couldn't walk, basically. So we had to take him back. The next 3 days, he basically laid almost comatose in bed. We thought we were going to lose him. He came through, but it turned out he had a stroke. It paralyzed the left side of his body. It affected his speech, so he had no mobility. He had no strength. We got him in a hospital rehab. Thank God for that. And he did very aggressive therapy for almost 4 or 5 weeks in the hospital. And when I say aggressive, he was doing 4, 5 hours of therapy 5, 6 days a week at a minimum.
Was this something that was covered under his insurance?
Yes, so he had Blue Cross and he had Medicare also. So everything was paid for through the insurance and through Medicare. It's amazing in the 4 weeks, watching your father who's so strong, them using harnesses to move him, it's hard.
Right.
And we were there every day, us kids, family. My mom never left him. After that, we had to make a decision. He wasn't enough to come home. We could have brought him home and had done home care, but the therapy is not as aggressive. It's only 2, if we're lucky, 3 times a week. He would have had PT, OT, and speech, but it's still not enough. We needed that extra therapy. So I started looking at various subacute nursing facilities. It had to be somewhere where it was convenient for us family members to be able to go in a drop of a hat. It had to be where I can go or my siblings can go on our way to work, on our way home from work, in between, running errands. It had to be easy access. We settled on a place in West Bloomfield, just 2 miles from the house. Basically, we settled on them mostly because of the physical therapy that they offered. He was there for 3 months, almost actually 4 months. He came home in November. He had a stroke end of May, spent June in the hospital, and then came home end of November. When he came home, I had hired a private care nurse aides. I had a health care company that sent over aides to help us because we didn't, even though we knew what to do, we didn't know what to do. It's very different when you're in that home environment and you don't have the medical professionals to tell you what to do. We did a lot of reading and a lot of self-educating.
So you have to be very careful who you're actually going to hire to bring into your home.
So we went with a licensed facility, with a licensed company. At the same time, the facility that we were at, I had talked to a lot of the administrative people, and they put me in contact with a couple of other people who were certified nurse assistants that were independent but certified, and who had done home care and subacute care. So one of them that I interviewed was wonderful. She immediately clicked with my dad. So I hired her. In the meantime, I still had the other home care for another month. So when that dwindled out, the private nurse aide that I hired, she stayed on, and then I was able to hire another one. So we had 2 nurse aides from basically from the beginning of when he was home, helping us.
Are the nurse aides covered through the insurance?
No. So unfortunately, my dad was not poor enough to go on Medicaid. I don't want to say that, use that word poor enough, but he had too many assets. So, and he already had his trust established. So it was difficult for us to filter out assets and not get noticed by the government. So we were stuck. And it's very different between Medicaid and Medicare, and people don't understand that. Even with Medicaid, you get some help, but you still don't get enough help. With Medicare, you get almost nothing.
Yeah.
Unless you have a nursing facility coming, you know, a home care facility coming. And again, once you get better, you lose them, and then it's just you. So I hired 2 private. Because in those 4 months, even with him being in rehab, it was a lot. It was a lot of stress, a lot of back and forth, and we needed that extra help. We needed that extra where we weren't taking so much time off of work. We needed somebody there with my mom to help her with him when we're not there. So we worked out schedules amongst us 4 kids and my sister-in-laws and my brother-in-law. At this time, my sister and her husband and her daughter had moved in with my parents to help, and help care for them because we needed that help. Now, mind you, I was still in Chicago, so I was going back and forth. We battled his stroke and all the downfalls. He was doing great, you know, for a year. He progressed. He was walking 600 feet with a walker without us holding him. But unfortunately, he had mini strokes, TIAs. And anytime that happened, it set him back. And then you'd have to go through the whole process again of retraining. And we got him all the equipment at home, a pedaling, you know, a foot pedal bike, arm pulls, squishies. We would have regular, even when therapy was not there, the CNAs would do therapy with him. We would do therapy with him. He got to the point where he was helping us. He was helping us pull himself up, go to the bathroom, help button, feed himself. He helped us. His speech came back. He got some of the mobility in the left side, but again, like I said, with every TI, it took him 2 steps back. And with all the extra therapy, it only got him a half step forward. So pneumonia, UTI, everything was a setback. We fought hard to get him the best medical treatment. You know, a lot of times, unfortunately, in the hospitals, they'll look at him, older man, can't move. They're not as aggressive. Us as a family, we were aggressive. And I'm glad that the internist he had in the hospital was aggressive to make sure he got the treatment he deserved. So we read a lot about his condition. Every time they threw a drug or something, it was quickly Googling to understand what they were saying. And we worked as a team, my siblings and my family, we worked as a team. So, but there was one person which was myself or my sister. We were the ones who consumed all the information, talked to the doctors, understood everything, and then facilitated it out to the rest of the family and what needed to be done. And this was the course we were going to take. Or what do you think? It was always, whatever we did, it was a group discussion of the next steps. And it included, that discussion included my father and my mother. It wasn't us making the decision. It's not us who was ill. It was him. And we had to respect that, what he wanted.
Right.
He wanted to fight, so we were going to fight for him. And that's what we did.
Yeah.
He ended up June of 2018. I got a call. I was working in Mexico, and that he fell and broke his hip while doing exercise. Turned out, my brother called me, he said, I've never heard Dad scream in pain the way he is. It's bone on bone, basically. So he was in excruciating pain. At this point, he had been in palliative care for about 6 months. So we weren't doing anything to extra means or anything overly. We were just keeping him comfortable and at ease. We did decide to do hip replacement because he was still viable. He still knew everything, could talk, can do everything. He was not as strong, but he was still able to be around.
Yeah.
And he was fine with it.
Yeah.
We had a talk with him, though, for him to understand that he had made a comment one day, and I said, Babo, you got to understand having hip replacement is not going to help you walk. It's going to take the pain away. He said, okay, I still want it. We did it. And unfortunately, that surgery made him even weaker.
Oh.
So it made him to the point where even the simple things that he was doing, he didn't have the energy. And even in therapy, he couldn't do the therapy. And that's when I knew it was not good. And he realized it on his own. So in July of 2018, I had come home from my assignment at the time for a visit, and he said, Betty, it's time. So I said, okay, talked to a priest a couple times. He's actually talked to a priest a few times during this whole phase, and did call one of our priests, and they came and spoke to him. And basically it was, and the doctors told us all along, he'll know when it's time. He will let you know it's time. And he chose to stop dialysis, knowing what was going to come. But it was his choice.
Yes.
And we made sure that he was okay and he understood everything. But he was at peace and he was ready.
Yeah.
And he said, I want to do it my way. And he did it his way. That week, the house was full of friends and family, and everybody was around him, and they saw him, talked to him, and had their time.
He was comfortable with his decision.
He was beyond comfortable. We had our time with him, and his friends had their time with him.
One of the things Jolene and I were talking about before the show started is, as a community, we live a faithful life.
Yeah.
And we really have to learn to die with faith. And I believe that your dad felt
He
that.
had a lot of faith, and he did. After he passed away, my mom had a difficult time. You know, you focus on one parent, you forget about the other parent. Not that you forget, but she did a really good job of hiding a lot of things. And that's where you started seeing a lot of her ailments, that her arthritis, her back pains, her leg pains. And he died 6 months short of their 50th anniversary, so they've been together longer than half their life. My mom, after 19 months after my dad, she passed away in her sleep unexpectedly. My mom had no health issue besides arthritis and back pain and leg pain.
Yep.
She died in her sleep unexpectedly March of 2020.
Wow.
Some say of a broken heart,
Yeah.
but she also was ready.
Yeah.
And she would always say that, you know, she didn't want to be a burden. That was my dad's word, burden. And we'd always tell him, why? Why do you think that way?
Yeah.
But it's two different way, you know.
Yeah.
But
Both of your journeys are a little different, but
Yeah.
it's very sad. And
Yeah.
your parents were both lucky
yes,
to have you in their lives to care for them.
yeah, lucky to have the families that we
Yeah.
have to do it.
Yeah. Now, Jolene is here to share her experience, but in a different way. Jolene, you work as a nurse, right? You're a nurse practitioner
I am.
with John Paul Home Healthcare.
Yes, but I work as a nurse with them.
You
so.
do? Okay. Can you tell us a little bit about what you do and how you would help in a situation like what Leanne and Dora just talked about?
Yes. Leanne actually spoke a little bit about home care and kind of how we come in, but then when the job is done, we kind of pull back. And I think that's a big misconception people have. You know, after a hospital discharge, a home care referral would come, and we would come in as a nurse, and I would assess the situation and kind of say, you know, hey, does this patient need, you know, social work, physical therapy, occupational therapy? Do they need a home health aide? From a nursing standpoint, are there meds in line? Do they have any wounds that need caring for? As well as, is the family teachable? You know, if a patient has a daughter that might help with the wound care, we come in and we make sure that the situation is safe for the patient. So once the patient is cared for in these ways, you know, families can take over the wound care, medications are in line, physical therapy has reached that capacity of home teaching and understanding, we do pull back, and we do have to unfortunately say, you know, go forward and find that care that can be there, you know, 7 days a week or according to what you need. Because ultimately, insurances will only see it as, you know, what can we do in that sense.
Right.
So
There has to be an end goal.
an end goal, exactly. We can't be long term as much as we'd love to, and as much as it hurts sometimes to kind of see a situation and say, oh, I wish I could just stay. There is that end goal in our sense that
And I
We
think
do
one of the
have to-
things that I didn't realize was that a lot of this type of care is not covered by insurance, and how important it is to actually be prepared for something like this to happen. And we did discuss a little bit about how, for me, I'll be turning 50. I might not think of it, but before I know it, I could be at that stage, what I could do to prepare for when that time comes. And what is it that you've learned through your journey?
And it can come sooner than you think.
Yeah.
I mean, being 50 is not a guarantee. We'd like to live till we're old, but we can become incapacitated at any point in time. And it doesn't mean just getting old and sick. It could mean getting into a car accident and having a brain injury. It could mean falling and becoming paralyzed and unable to care for yourself. So incapacity looks different on, you know, for everyone. at any point in time. And I know we're talking about elderly parents right now, but as a parent, you have children, it could happen at any point in time.
Yes.
So the time to plan is right now.
It is very, and there is insurance.
It is. So
To
first
help
of all,
with care.
even if your employer offers long-term, make sure you have it. But I found out later that there is insurance that you could buy for that later in years, or when you actually need it, when you do fall ill, that other additional insurance will kick in to cover your, whether it's nursing facility or additional home care that you might need, and so forth. I don't know the name of it. I can't think of it right now, but I will.
Maybe it's something
Put
we
it
can
in the
share.
comments,
And
yes.
I do want to remind the viewers, if you have any questions to ask, please ask them. I am watching as you are tuning in. So if you have any questions, please feel free to ask, and our panel would love to share their information with you. So the insurance, if you could share that on there. One thing I wanted to ask Jolene, Jolene, obviously you're a nurse, so how important is it to make sure that whoever it is that somebody's hiring to bring into their home to care for their parents or a loved one that's in need, how important is it to make sure that they're qualified?
I would say extremely. We were talking earlier before the show. You can really hurt your back if you're not trained in the right way to pull a patient up.
Or you could hurt the patient.
You can hurt the patient. Leanne spoke earlier that the aides that helped her dad, they were able to tell about UTIs prior to. So you got to have a little bit of a background in the sense of, this part of your elbow is turning red. It might turn into a sore or things like that. So it's pretty important.
see, just with my job, we have a lot of people calling, especially now with COVID and having pulled their parents out of nursing homes, calling for caregivers. And I do notice a lot of times they're not as concerned about the quality of the care. It's more who can we get that we can get along with to come be at the house, to care for the parents, that can, fit in with the family. And that's really, I'm not saying it's the last thing you should worry about, but it's not the first thing.
That's okay if the person that they're caring for is still mobile. But when a patient is not mobile, you really want somebody who's certified, that knows how to transport patient, to look for those UTIs, the bed sores, and everything else that goes along with it. In my father's case, it was both aides were certified. They had worked in healthcare facilities before. They did private care, so they knew. I trusted them. I didn't have to worry when they were there with him. One of them I trusted even more so, where she would actually come with me to doctor's appointments. The doctors got to know her, and sometimes I couldn't make it or my sister couldn't make it. She would take him.
go.
And she would report back in detail everything. And she understood the medical terms. She understood everything to explain it to us what was going on. So I think having a help in the home is okay if they're not certified, as if the person is capable of doing stuff. But when you're transporting and that person is not able to do things for themselves, you want to have somebody who's certified, who knows what they're doing.
Yeah.
And not just certification, but you want to be able to do background checks, check references.
Yes.
I mean, you really want to look at the whole, and there's a lot of information out there if we only look for it. And
Yes.
sometimes, just like we hire contractors, how many contractors do people hire? And then after the fact, when they get screwed, they're like, oh my God, there's all these reviews about them.
Yes.
It's the same thing with people who provide care, whether it's a nurse, a doctor, or a home care provider. There's so much information out there. Some of them even have criminal records, so you do have to be very careful and Google them at a minimum.
I was very lucky because my two came from very highly, one was from the nursing facility, and one she worked through another healthcare facility. But we also did call the references and so forth, so we did our own checks to make sure. And plus, yeah, they were great with my dad. They were great with my mom.
That's great that it was a good experience.
They would get antsy because, you know, when they were there, the only thing they had to do was take care of him. I didn't care if they studied. None of us cared if they watched TV, studied, read, talked on the phone. But the minute he needed something or he needed help with something, they were at his disposal. They would want to cook or clean. No, that's not what we hired you for. We hired you for his well-being and whatever he wanted. And let me tell you, he took a liking to both of them. One of them is, I mean, when he was in the worst, sometimes he'd wake up in the worst mood just from a bad night. And boy, could they turn his personality the other way in an instant. I mean, it was also, they knew how to work with him and how to be compassionate. And that's the biggest thing, is when you have a sick parent, is the compassion, the understanding. They might be angry, you can't get angry, even though you do get angry. But you can't. You have to kind of keep it back, because then it makes them even more agitated.
Right. So
Yeah.
as important as it is to have a caregiver that you can relate to and that you're happy with, how important is it, Jolene, from what you see, for the family to work as a team for the success of the patient?
Huge. I'm hearing your story, and it's unheard of, actually, how
Without my
on
family,
a team
we couldn't
you
do
were.
it. We had schedules of who was coming what night, what day, who was going to be at the house, who was not going to be at the house, who's going to the nursing facility, who's going to the hospital. So even when he went into the nursing facility and into the hospital, I still had our aides with us. They went there with him. They wouldn't leave him.
That's great.
I kept them hired, and they were there. It was that peace of mind that whatever he needed, he was taken care of, and he didn't have to wait.
And see, we did not have anyone to turn to. So Andre is only one of two children. His older sister has her own somewhat of a learning disability of her own. And anyway, she has a daughter and a husband, and just not capable whatsoever of providing any meaningful, regular help for Dad. And then, of course, his mom had passed away, like I explained earlier, so the whole burden was on us. And, you know, I don't just work for a firm, I own it. And we both own two businesses, and we have these two kids. And when somebody needs, you know, your dad, those two that helped him, I'm sure that there were some days, other than your family, those were only two in his world that he could socialize with.
Yes, because there were days where, especially if I was traveling, I mean, you know, my sister worked, we all worked. So sometimes he wouldn't see any of us until he was ready for bed. And that's
That's
it was them.
life.
And even with, so the four of us, my three, you know, in-laws, that's seven of us, that we rotated as much as we could in helping. Another big thing was, and I am forever grateful for my dad's family and my mom's family and his friends that would, in the 2 years, he used to always say, Betty, it's been 2 years, 2 months. Enough is enough. You know, he was counting the months. He was in this stroke.
Yeah.
And that house, that door, was a revolving door of people coming to visit him.
Wow.
It's amazing how much that just helps the spirit in a person who is trapped in their body. His brothers, his cousins, his in-laws, all coming to visit. Whether it's 10 minutes or whether it's 4 hours, they were doing it, and they were dedicated. They would.
Very nice.
Saturday afternoon, you knew who was coming.
God bless. That's very
You know,
nice.
I mean, Friday
Because you don't
afternoon-
always have that.
So we, as a family, as us kids and as my mom, we had even a greater support system because we had so much other family that loved him so much that was around. They didn't disappear. They were there. And the grandkids, let's go see Baba. I mean, they were there all the time, and that was, you know, the joy of his life.
So it is very important
Neighbors.
for family to stay.
Neighbors, our lifetime neighbors. They all, on a continuous basis, next door, down the revolving door. I'm telling you, that door was a revolving door. It never stopped.
That's always, it's nice. And you're fortunate.
Very,
And
we were
especially
very
in our
fortunate.
community, a lot of us are very fortunate to have so
Very
much
fortunate.
family.
Yeah,
You know,
well,
and-
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
What happens when there is the miscommunication between families and the disconnect? It only stresses out the person's ill. They're
And
not.
have you
yeah.
experienced that, Jolene, where you've gone to help an individual where the family was not on the same page with the care? And what
I
happens?
see that
then?
more so in the hospital. When I work in the hospital and we get to that end of life stage. As for the home, I'm kind of in and out a little before I see that. But in the hospital, it's really sad because, you know, one person may say, you know, pull the plug, you know, enough is enough, and the next might say, you're killing them. What do you mean? And it goes back and
Yeah.
forth.
I personally have experienced that in my family.
Yeah.
And it's not an easy decision to make, especially when it divides up the family.
That's why you have
Yeah.
to have the directives already in place.
Huge.
And with my dad, he was able to state what he wanted. And even with us, even as much as we were a lot of times on the same page, there were a lot of times we were not on the same page. But we had to talk it out as a family and evaluate everything. And like I said, it didn't just involve us kids. It involved my dad too in that decision. We laid out the options and the you know, what it will come out of those options. And ultimately, we let him decide.
Yeah. I think this falls under what we said.
Yeah.
You have to die with faith. It's certain.
Father Rodney said it perfectly in his homily about his mom, God rest her soul. He said she had a happy death. And we forget that there is, you know, there needs to be a faith in that. And the final rites and these things, it's what we live for, is to get to heaven. So
Yeah.
That's-
And I do believe that because he struggled so much, but he had the faith, but not until that end did I ever see that faith even stronger. And when you say a happy death, to me, he had the perfect death
Yeah.
of doing what he wanted.
You know, with dementia, they say that your parent dies twice. When they first lose their memory, and it's like 1,000 times because there are so many steps where they just deteriorate and then deteriorate. And my dad has not got to the point where he doesn't remember us. Thank God. If you see him, he looks totally normal, but he's not at the position to tell us what he wants or to pray the Our Father anymore. And that's where designating a point, either announcing your wishes now, which my mom has told us for many years, like if I ever end up in the hospital, you pull the plug. So all 5 of us know that. So all 5 of us, and you know, my mom has made very clear certain things, and you know, thankfully she shared them with me in a way that I can help her plan. She knows what she needs to do. There are a few other things she still has to do, but Dad's not in that position.
Yeah.
Thank God your dad had, you know, the wherewithal to the end. But we can't count on that. We can't count on that. And now that dementia is becoming more and more and more prevalent, even in younger years, we see people now in their 40s and 50s. Starting to
Early onset.
Yeah, right. It's
do-
so important to pick a. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
To just have a point person, pick somebody out, or make your wishes clear.
Yes.
You have to be given that choice, though. What I've observed in the hospital is our community, especially, don't tell my mom she's dying. And I'm like, okay, you know what, why? Or don't tell my mom that this happened to her, but she's in the hospital, she knows something's wrong. And that shielding of what's really happening,
Denial.
it's
not fair.
not
You're
fair to
robbing that
your
person.
I
dad
agree,
knew.
and
Yeah.
but my dad knew everything.
Yeah.
I mean,
But he was part of his team.
he was,
A
that's
lot
what
of
needs
times
to
in our
happen.
community, they're
and
not.
we never kept anything
Yeah.
from him. I mean, if it was good, it was good, and if it was bad, we told him it was bad. And at the end, we told him, Baba, you will not. You're only going to deteriorate even more from here. There's no more getting better.
Yeah.
But we'll do what you want and keep you comfortable. Yeah.
And he was able to accept it.
He was he was ready. He was ready. His biggest thing was he didn't want to leave us.
Yeah.
To the moment he made that decision, he was worried about my mom. Who was going to take care of her? I said, Papa, she's got us. What do you mean who's going to take care of her? I mean, what kind of silly question is that? Of course we're going to take care of Mom. Don't worry.
Yep.
That's
his way.
his not so much us kids, but my mom. That's what he was worried about. And thank God, like I said, he was all with it. So he had his discussions with all of us, and him and my mom had endless discussions.
I think that contributed to his happy death.
Endless
Is knowing.
discussions.
Yeah.
Just knowing.
And it was her telling him, I'm okay.
Yeah.
Don't worry about me. I'm fine.
Which
Worry about
contributes
you.
to the happy death.
And that's what, and I'm telling you, if you talk to my siblings, my family, they'll tell you, it was like one big party for a week. I'm not joking.
Yeah.
He was,
I hope I go like that.
it was funny because when hospice came to set, because he was in a hurry, my dad was in a hurry, come on, when is this, I want to go home. And I said, Baba, we got to get everything in order. We can't just discharge you, bring you home, and it's going to happen.
Yeah.
I got to get hospice, and that's the other thing. And then you got to go through the whole hospice thing and learning about keeping them comfortable then, because there's going to be a point where he's not going to be able to communicate with you.
Yeah.
And
So I just really quick, I want to
Yeah.
ask this because Niran is asking this question, and you mentioned there's a possibility he won't be able to communicate when he comes home. She would like us to talk a little bit about a medical power of attorney and how important, Jolene, maybe you could talk about how important is it to get it at what point
Now.
when they're in the hospital.
Or as
at
soon
what
as
point?
possible, but now. I mean, I'm 26 tomorrow.
Yeah.
Now, like
Now.
I should have one now.
Yeah.
I mean,
We should.
Everybody should
Then I
have
never,
one.
I don't have one.
We
I
had, we
never
had
thought of it.
We
Or your
definitely, we
husband
have it for
can-
both. I mean, I don't even have it for me,
Unless
which is
I have it
horrible.
and I don't know about it.
But,
you would know.
but my parents had it, who had medical
Yeah.
power of attorney
Yeah.
of each other, and then if something, we had it already in place.
You
it
already had
sounds
it in
given
place.
like,
Yeah.
oh, my husband will be mine, but God forbid, what if something happens to him? And I need
Yeah.
to have a second in place, and
It's-
people
yeah.
you trust.
I never thought of it,
Yeah.
but you're right. Now,
Yeah.
Now's the time.
So there
It's-
are different documents that people should know about. There's your general power of attorney that you can grant anyone, all four of us. Each one of us can give anybody that we want a power of attorney to go act on our behalf. A power of attorney gives somebody else authority for, certain things. You can lay out specific things that give them specific powers to act for either certain accounts or everything under the sun. But that has to be at a time that you are competent, that you could step in and act for yourself at any point in time. A durable power of attorney gives somebody authority to act on your behalf, make decisions for you, conduct financial transactions for you, take out loans for you, take out insurance, so on and so forth, in your incapacity. And the beauty of a durable power of attorney, and you can make that as broad or limited as you like, and that's where, you really should consult with an attorney if you do want to, excuse me, make it more specific. But they do have all kinds of, just general forms online. The beauty of a durable power of attorney is you have chosen a person to act on your behalf in the event that you're incapacitated, which would be in lieu of having to go to court. So, you end up in a car accident and now you're in a coma. You're incapacitated. Who's going to make decisions for you? If you don't have a durable power of attorney in place and the house is in your name, your employment benefits, somebody's got to get you short-term or long-term disability, depending on the situation. All of the access to those things in your name, bank accounts, cars, to avoid repossession, all these kind of things, somebody would have to actually go and file a petition for a guardianship or conservatorship with the court to become the authorized person to act on your behalf. And one of the issues with having to go to court is you got to give notice to all interested persons. You have to get the court approval. All these people, when I say interested persons, so let's say there are 5 siblings in my family. Let's say one of my sisters doesn't want me to act on, let's say, God forbid, this is my mom we're talking about who's incapacitated. One of my sisters doesn't want me to be the representative for my mom. They have a right to go and object. So you file your petition for guardianship, which means you can make legal decisions on behalf of somebody. A conservatorship refers to the power to transact financially on somebody's behalf. You don't always need to have both, but oftentimes when someone's incapacitated, you do need both to act hand in hand, because everyone's got financial affairs and legal decisions that need to be made for them.
So these can be drawn up and executed only if you're not capable of making your own decisions.
So at the point that you're talking about the petitions for guardianship and...
for your medical.
Yeah, that means now, if somebody can still ask for a guardianship and conservatorship when you sort of have your wherewithal and you can actually go to court as the ward, okay, and object to somebody wanting to take guardianship over you and say, no, I can take care of myself, or no, I don't want that person, I want somebody else. With a durable power of attorney, that power, or even any power of attorney, you have to have capacity at the time the authority is granted.
Okay.
An advance directive is a whole different document in and of itself. Oftentimes when somebody's really sick in the hospital, a hospital will come and bring you their form, and it will be an advance directive that says, like, in the event that they can't breathe on their own, should we pull the plug or not? It gives very specific end of life type decisions. That's very specific to the end of life medical decisions. And short of all of those documents, you could have, of course, those are really the best ways to do it, all of those different ways. But, short of all that, you really just have to come to an agreement, because at the end of the day, you can have the best planning, estate planning possible. You've got it all lined up. And at the end of the day, if a sibling or a family member wants to come and object, you're going to end up in court anyway.
So it should really be discussed as a family before you finalize everything.
Absolutely. That's why the earlier, the better. I have announced to everyone in my family for the last 20 years, I do not want to be buried. I want to be cremated. I want my ashes in the ocean. Everyone knows. Now, that has nothing to do with, caring for the elderly.
Yeah.
But it's my wish, and you need to make all of your wishes known. Now, is my family going to follow it? My mom might not be very comfortable with me getting incinerated and not being in the same, cemetery with my dad and everyone else, because my dad passed away. So why aren't you going to Holy Sepulchre like everybody else? Why are you going to be in the ocean?
I told my family I'm writing my own eulogy because, God forbid, when I do die, they're going to be too distraught to talk about me, and I want to make sure they get it all right.
I like that idea.
Always in control.
Look, I'm crazy about
She's the
that.
oldest, you can tell.
I've already started the When I Die box. And we actually should expand that to
is.
When I Become Incapacitated
Yes.
and or Die box.
It is. It's
priest picked out.
Jolene, you're
Hopefully
way
he's
too young.
alive.
But you know what? When you after you go, and even with Jolene working in the field that she works in, and after caring for somebody, even us young people, we start thinking differently about. Okay, I got to get this. I got to do this, and yeah, I'm sorry, it happens.
Then it's going
After
to
that, I
happen,
bought
yeah.
my own plot. I mean, so I know where I'm going to. It does, because it puts a lot more. It makes things so realistic.
Yeah.
In the preparations that you do have to make, so your loved ones don't have to make it for you.
That's true. That is true.
Because that was always the guessing game. Are we doing the right thing? Are we doing enough? Are we,
And I think
what
it-
else
it's
can we
something-
do?
I don't even want to say it's just our community. I think people in general have a hard time talking about the
Yes.
not the what if, when.
And they don't want to give up the control. So some of the ways that you get around having to go to a lawyer to draft a trust or do any kind of extensive estate planning is make sure that your kids are on the deeds. Okay, so that when you die, they don't have to go to probate to get the house out of mom or dad's name and into whoever's name. It's already done, right? The proper
It's
deed
so
is
important.
drafted.
Yeah.
Same thing, car
But
titles,
there has to
boat
be trust
titles.
within the family and the siblings for
Exactly.
do that.
It is.
Yeah.
Yes.
Exactly.
And believe it or not, even the closest family can have falling outs when it comes to.
I've seen
I mean,
families
and
destroyed over
unfortunate
that
it
after a
has.
parent has passed away.
I've
Yeah.
litigated
Yeah.
families that I mean, it's unbelievable what they fight over, but it's devastating. And if the deceased person knew, with all the planning they did and all the announcements of wishes they made, that it still resulted in this, tragic, devastating loss of relationships and brokenness and really hostility and hatred, they'd be turning in their graves.
I thank God it made our family stronger
That's
and closer.
That is a blessing.
It really did.
It is a blessing. Yep. So now we have about a minute left. One question I wanted to ask is, what might you do differently with what you know today? So I guess we have about 20 seconds each, except for Jolene, who's the nurse. We'll just have you close it up.
Okay.
Dora, if there was anything you could have done different.
I would definitely, and this is what I'm trying to do right now with my mom, and she's healthy, thank God, and I hope she stays that way for a long time. Make sure there is a first floor bathroom, bedroom, wide doors. Make sure that home is accommodating to somebody who can grow old and possibly use a walker, possibly have a wheelchair, be able to shower. I would never put carpet again in anybody's room because of what we lived with. It was just awful. And I know it's not his fault, but it was just a terrible experience. It made everything just so much more difficult. And also, get those documents in order. Make sure you don't have to file the deed. You don't have to record these deeds that I'm saying to include the family members. There's no duty to record deeds. Just make sure they're drafted and ready, so in the event that you need them, you have them, and you avoid probate.
I don't know if there's anything I would do different. I'm going to be honest. My dad took care of a lot of it. Even the home, built a home, ranch, extra wide doorways, extra wide hallways, extra wide everything. Shower that it's a walk, like no bathtub, just a walk. I mean, so he had already taken care of everything. I thought about that question. I can't think of something. We did everything. We did everything, and I don't regret one thing that we did.
Again, like that
We
is a
did it
blessing.
together. I don't
Yeah.
regret it. We made him comfortable. We made him felt loved. We were by his side through the worst and the best. I mean, we didn't, when we went to visit, he came with us. When we went to dinner, he came with us. I mean,
And that's
he wasn't
important.
kept home. I
Yeah.
mean, he was out. I remember the first time when he got to go to Shenandoah, finally for a dinner, and to go down and sit with the guys downstairs. And then they'd send us away and say, go, we got him, don't worry. And they'll pull his wheelchair closer to them. I mean, his friends.
But his planning made you guys comfortable.
He planned. He
Yeah.
had his trust in place. He had his
So that's
directives in order.
something that we should all keep
he
in
had,
mind.
He had everything in order. So we didn't have to, you know, I mean, he didn't have his plots, but do you know what I mean? He didn't think that, but he had everything where we didn't have to make those choices or
Yeah.
scramble.
It's a blessing. And then Jolene, what advice would you give?
Don't be shy to talk about the uncomfortable. It's an uncomfortable topic, but it is a topic. And it's okay to have these scary conversations, but they bring peace to families. They bring peace to the situation. Don't shelter your loved one if he or she is the one that's sick. If they're sick, let them know they're sick. Let them be involved so that they can have their peace when they go, rather than this confusion and
Right.
scary.
It is really robbing them of their
It's
the
robbing
peace.
of peace and
Yeah.
a happy death. So
And if I could add something to that, don't be afraid to go outside yourself and look for resources. We suffered in silence too long. My husband is a very quiet, non-confrontational person. He did not want to let go of his dad, and we were living miserably and in a very difficult situation for a long time. I found this website, agingcare.com. I set up a profile. I cannot tell you the love and the advice, and it was that website that gave me the best advice about all kinds of things, from Medicare, Medicaid, insurance, facilities, how do you get referral sources for help, home care,
Dora, would you
everything.
mind sharing those in the comments?
Absolutely.
Because it is on the mom's page. So if you go in, anything that you want to share, please, like, feel free to put those. But I know that you had a lot of resources that were listed.
Yes.
And if you wouldn't mind just listing them for people that will go in, tune in and watch later on. And I know there's a lot of people that suffer in silence, and maybe this is a way for them to find hope.
Now, for the documents, you should always talk to an attorney. But if, whoever wants to just take a stab.
But like agingparents.com or any of those resources, if you could share them, that would be great.
Right. I'll also put the state website where you can get some of those general forms.
Perfect.
So people can just be exposed to them.
It's hard to believe our hour is up so quickly. So thank you so much for sharing your journey with us.
Thank you for having
And
us.
I hope that
you.
somehow we were able to help somebody that was watching that's going through a difficult time. And I notice, I hear so many stories about families that are dealing with a loved one that has dementia or is just aging, and their health is taking a turn for the worst. It's becoming very, very difficult. So I appreciate you sharing your journey with us. God bless you guys. And thank you, viewers, for tuning in. If you have questions, you missed your opportunity to get it live, but feel free to put them in comments, and I hope you would at least just keep track of what's going on and maybe answer some of those questions. And thank you for joining us. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you guys.